Hello. I want to thank Raymond and the team of people who have worked incredibly hard to put this event together. I view it as critical to the goal of reducing climate change, and I think the timing's right given the convergence of a number of factors. We're seeing mainstream awareness about the devastating effects of climate change engulfing our forests, pounding our coasts, and leveling our fields. Increased leadership from private companies stepping up to address the challenge ahead of policymakers. We're also seeing an exponential leap forward in the science about what we need to do to stop global warming. Biochar is part of that solution. I really appreciate this opportunity to be part of the solution. My name's Andy Mercy, and I'm going to share an overview of a biochar land investment fund that we're forming in partnership with a great company called Pacific Biochar. This strategy is the result of about a year of deep research into biochar. It's the result of about 100 conversations with entrepreneurs, researchers, and investors. It's not a fully wrought business plan. It's the beginning of an executive summary. I present it here and now because I'd love to get your feedback and your input. The basic premise is that we cannot wait for mass adoption of regenerative practices if we are to reduce the risks of climate change. We have to find a way to lead with the assumption that results will beget action from others, and mass adoption will follow. This strategy, this land fund, is an attempt to lead. I call it the Sitting Bull Fund because it's in honor of a guy who predicted we'd be in this mess and who also gestured towards the solution as early as 150 years ago. At the end of the presentation, if you would like more information, please send an email to the address listed on the last slide. I'd love to hear from you. Our vision is bold but simple: to reclaim soils for the next generation of regenerative farmers. We have to do this. The average age of U.S. farmers in 2017 was 58 years old. We desperately need to inspire a new generation of farmers who will take up regenerative practices in order to reduce global warming and feed the world. These regenerative stewards represent perhaps our biggest hope when it comes to mitigating the risks of climate change. Since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, farming practices have accelerated carbon loss and global warming due to practices like tilling, chemical inputs, and monocropping. In fact, conventional agricultural practices contribute about 35%, 1/3 of annual human-related greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, that's a lot. Global topsoil has lost up to 80% of pre-industrial revolution carbon, turning soil into unhealthy dirt. The problem is that farmers aren't taught about soil health. In California and around the globe, the risk of soil degradation to our food production system and to life itself is astronomical. According to the World Bank, and this blows me away, we have 60 harvests left. Think about that. That's going to happen during the lifetime of our children. This all adds up to some really terrifying news. But there's good news too, and it's this: soil is the biggest carbon sink we have. It's as simple as that. Managed properly, soil can help draw down the 830 gigatons of legacy carbon in the atmosphere needed to prevent catastrophic global warming. That's 830 billion tons of legacy carbon that we've released since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. We can do this, but we have to act fast. And that's exactly what we intend to do. It just so happens that one of the oldest technologies in the world, perhaps the first technology, the act of burning our biological waste streams, is also a clue to achieving drawdown faster than we thought possible. Our mission for this fund is to prove the theory that biochar can accelerate biological time to restore carbon, organics, and water resilience to degraded soils. Over the next 10 years, our goal is to sequester nearly 30 million tons of CO2 equivalent while generating attractive returns for our shareholders. Growing soil health with biochar will trigger a positive feedback loop with many benefits. We'll see increased annual biomass production, more nutritious food, reduced forest fires, reduced coastal dead zones and eutrophication, reduced land needed to feed the world's population, all with increased profits to farmers, with increased returns to investors, and of course, with reduced global warming. So how does biochar achieve this? I love the coral reef analogy. Take a body of water. Without a coral reef, the amount of organic material, the amount of life you'll find in that water at any one moment, call it X. Add a coral reef to that same body of water, and the amount of organic material will multiply rapidly to 10x, 100x, ultimately to a billion X. The same is true if biochar is added to degraded soils. Take a section of degraded soil without biochar, and the amount of organic material of life in the soil is X. Add biochar mixed with compost manure to that soil and combine with a few inexpensive regenerative practices, and rapidly the organic material will go from X to 10x to 100x and eventually to a billion X. The recalcitrant biochar pores act as a haven for mycorrhizal fungi and other beneficial organisms. They increase water retention, microbial activity. They build carbon, the basis of life. Biochar, an ounce of biochar has more surface area than a football field. A teaspoon of healthy soil contains over 1 billion microorganisms. In fact, biochar is one of only 5 technologies recognized as carbon negative by the IPCC. It's the cheapest, fastest way to get carbon back into the soil. This is basically the first step of regenerative agriculture. We're not inventing anything new here. We're simply accelerating the biological clock. We know this from the copious amounts of research and from the terra preta soils of the Amazon. You may know this story already. It's an amazing one. Indigenous cultures in parts of the Amazon basin of South America infused the nutrient-thin soils of their land with massive amounts of biochar centuries before the arrival of Europeans. This dark, carbon-rich soil, called the terra preta, boosted agricultural productivity and helped support a regional population estimated to be between 5 and 10 million people. That's New York City, folks. It remains so nutrient dense today that it is often dug up and sold in Brazilian markets as potting soil. But what you may not know is that there are also terra preta soils in California. I've seen them. They're out there almost by mistake. For the past 30 years, Biomass energy plants have land-applied very large quantities of carbon-rich ash, which is effectively a low-carbon biochar, to forests, ranches, orchards, and farmlands. You can see them on Google Earth. This was done almost in secret at the beginning, as plant owners looked to get rid of a byproduct they viewed as an expensive liability. But over time, a few of the people responsible for disposing of the ash noticed changes to the land where biochar and ash had been applied. They decided to call their local ag extension representatives, and before long, there were documented management practices. Today, we're testing these lands to understand better the soil and yield changes that took place, working closely with researchers at UC Davis and Cornell. Much of the data right now is anecdotal until we get the results back, but I can tell you firsthand that a visit to these sites and conversations with landowners makes clear that biochar has led to darker, richer soils, higher yields, and less reliance on chemical inputs and water, leading to greater profitability for landowners. In one case, land value is estimated to have increased over 20% per year for 8 straight years. These results provided the inspiration to our own efforts, and we owe these pioneers a debt of gratitude. Fortunately, thanks to an explosion of available data, we can build a proprietary land acquisition mapping strategy using machine learning that will take into consideration data from multiple sources. Simply put, we'll identify degraded, undervalued lands that offer little production value today, but high production value tomorrow when we're done with them. We will start in California, but eventually acquire lands around the globe to reach our goal of 10 million acres. Our California biochar will come from our strategic partner, Pacific Biochar, a 10-year leader in the space with the most scalable production model we found. You've probably heard from their founder, Josiah Hunt, today. He has been making, studying, selling biochar longer than most anyone in the industry, and his passion for his business is simply contagious. He's taught me so much. Pacific Biochar is able to produce large quantities of biochar with lower capital investment than other modes. Their feedstocks are sourced from overcrowded forests at high risk for catastrophic forest fire. And Pacific Biochar has worked with numerous agricultural clients over the years, with dozens of case studies demonstrating increased yields and water conservation. Josiah puts it well when he says that forest management problems become climate change solutions, and we leave a legacy of fertile soil. If you'd like to purchase biochar for your business, Pacific Biochar can work with you to replace toxic or high carbon materials and design solutions to meet your specific needs. They also provide a fantastic carbon offset program for companies interested in getting to net zero. You can learn more about them at pacificbiochar.com. Biochar is central to our strategy of accelerating the transition to regenerative soil, but it's not the only piece. It needs to be combined with 4 other critical regenerative practices. To speed up the effects of biochar in the soil, it's best to mix it with additional organic material, such as compost, and then moisten it with water or a nutrient-rich liquid in order to attract microbes and fungi. Add perennials, trees, ground covers, and mob grazing, and the overall result is an increase in carbon and beneficial organisms in the soil, as well as water resilience and overall sustainability. This can happen fast, in a matter of a couple of years. The goal is to transform dirt into soils that have the potential to produce 50% to 100% yield increases versus conventional agricultural yields, while using fewer toxic inputs and conserving water. Biochar yield benefits continue for centuries after a single application. This is a long-term fix. Our portfolio construction will focus on a couple of key investment criteria, such as geographic diversification and appropriate deal structure to mitigate risk, and a couple of key return drivers, such as soil health and cash flow. These will ensure that we manage risk and maximize returns for our investors. Cash flow opportunities will include growing forage crops, leasing our lands for grazing, leasing our lands to solar companies, and ecotourism, to name a few immediate opportunities. During the investment horizon of each fund, starting with our pilot Sitting Bull fund, we'll generate yields from cash flow activities and dividends based on land values. At the end of the investment horizon, most likely about 7 to 10 years, we'll sell our lands or lease them to the next generation of regenerative stewards. We've not finalized the investment opportunity yet, but we believe investors should expect 12 to 15% IRR plus a 1.5 multiple on their principal over that 7 to 10 year period. It's worth mentioning that historically, farmland is negatively correlated to most other asset classes and therefore has performed very well relative to those other asset classes. We dedicate our first fund to Sitting Bull, who predicted that we would end up here in 1877. Strangely enough, he said, they have a mind to till the soil, and they deface the earth with their buildings and refuse. Biochar gives us a chance to reverse this trend, to recycle our waste, to restore our balance with the planet, and to make our soils healthy again. Sitting Bull was a fitting influence because this plaque was found on Mount Tamalpais, right out my back door, where I go for much of my inspiration. The solution is literally under our feet. For more information, don't hesitate to reach out to my email address listed here. We hope that you'll join us, and we look forward to hearing from you.